We began on April Fool's Day, 1976, with a contract to the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service to study, it was called A Killer Whale Study in Puget Sound and Environs. That was the title of the contract. And it was from April 1st, 1976, April Fool's Day, to 30th September 76. But the government found a little extra money and kept us going through October until Halloween. Beginning in 1972, captures required a permit from the National Marine Fisheries Service that cost $100, and they had to know what the sustainable yield was, as it was argued that they came in and out of Puget Sound all the time. Nobody knew how many there were, and you have to determine what the sustainable yield or the removals could be. Mike Bigg had already done this in Canada, but his numbers were not entirely believed, or his techniques. And besides that, U.S. waters needed to be surveyed. 8th of April, 1976. We started up at 0700 and cast off at 0710 in the drizzly gloom that is typical weather for Port Angeles this time of year. At 0722, we cleared Edith's Hook and set 2850 RPM for Dungeness Spit, en route the southern Puget Sound. At 0730, we encountered 15 to 20 Phocinoides dali, doll porpoise, and at 0748, we saw about 15 more, swimming at high speed and frequently changing direction. None were interested in riding our bow. Perhaps they were feeding. At 0815, when just off the middle of Dungeness Spit, I spotted killer whales, or Sinus orca, about 1.5 miles ahead and coming our way. So, begins the encounter. The initial grouping of the whales was as follows. One large group of about 25 whales was most inshore, and that group consisted of females, young whales, and not so prominent males. Several other smaller groups, consisting of a male and one or two other whales, were further offshore, to a distance of about 3 miles from the beach. The general pattern of movement was in a line perpendicular to the coast. It was very apparent that the whales were initially concerned with avoiding us. They dove and came up several minutes later, a good long distance astern of us, toward Port Angeles. We turned and proceeded toward the large group again, and at a distance of about 400 yards, they porpoised briefly and dove again for several minutes. Both we and the whales did not behave calmly for the first hour. Rain was spoiling our opportunities for photographs, getting our cameras all wet, and dampening our spirits. Even at slow speed and with patience, we did not closely approach the group of 25 whales, so we started toward a smaller group a little further offshore. One male in company with a female and a calf about 11.5 feet long, PX2 frame 17. The main group of 25 whales calmed down immediately and resumed a leisurely dive interval of about 1 minute to 1 minute 50 seconds down, still proceeding westerly. By 10:15, we were abeam the stacks at the east end of Port Angeles. A school of Phocinoides dali had nonchalantly passed us going east without any apparent reaction from the killer whales. Now, just a side note here that at the time, this is basically a killer whale study. It was not well known that we had two ecotypes here, the meat-eating transients and a fish-eating ecotype known as residents. We sort of were just in the state of forming that knowledge at that time. We were beginning to trail the whales by about 1/3 mile, so I increased RPM to 1200. The whales reacted immediately by increasing activity. We closely approached them again by 10:20 near Edith's Hook and reduced RPMs to 1050. At this point, we were near one subgroup of about 15 whales. At 10:30, we observed one subgroup of 22 or 23 whales that came up for about 5 blows. A downtime of 3 minutes, 24 seconds was observed, and then 15 or 16 whales came up for 6 or 7 blows. By 10:43, the school structure had loosened to 2 groups of 6 whales, each with a large male, plus a couple of whales, plus several other groups of 4 or 5 whales, each with a male, plus 3 or 4 whales accompanied by a male, plus a few others. Due to the difficulty of counting numbers of whales that do not all surface at the same time, I can only estimate the total number of whales was about 40. At 11:15½, the whales momentarily stopped their forward motion to the west. We counted 5 large males in the aggregation and 2 other males, one accompanied by a female, the other with a female and a calf. The rain stopped and the wind was calm as we idled along at the speed of the whales. A baby whale spy-hopped, PX5-35, and another splashed the water with its flipper. I shot a number of photos, PX5, frames 28 to 33, of a large male whale that had a bite-like chunk missing from the bottom third of its dorsal fin on the posterior margin. Later found this was L8. Several whales lobtailed, not apparently related to our presence, and at 11:33 one small whale breached twice. Camille got a photo of the second breach. At 11:37 the whale started moving west again, and another little whale breached. By 11:50 we were abeam Port Angeles proper in 47 fathoms, or about 1 mile off Edith's Hook. We increased speed to 1050 RPM, 4 knots, and kept up with the whales, which were by now traveling in a broad line perpendicular to the shore, extending about 2 miles offshore. The line was really a dotted line of numerous small groups of whale moving together, but its orientation was definitely perpendicular to the coast of the strait. Shortly after noon, I began counting individual whale respirations and timing down times, etc. A female whale with double-notched scars on the posterior margin of her dorsal fin, PX6, frame 7, was up for 6 blows, down for 10 minutes and 35 seconds, up for 10 blows, down for 6 minutes 15 seconds, up for 10 blows, but her behavior seemed to indicate that she was not at ease with our presence. A male that was with her had no real distinctive markings, but by their association I was able to time him as follows. Up for 5 blows, down 7 minutes 45 seconds, up for 15 approximate blows, and down. These 2 whales were presumably feeding, and they were the third flanker group from the outside, or most offshore group. At 12:58, I reloaded both of my cameras, plus X7 and color roll 3 to frame 2. And began shooting as the whales all came together and seemed to be relaxing. The whales seemed unperturbed by our presence and frequently swam within a few meters of us. At 13:23, we were about a half mile offshore of Observatory Point. A young whale breached, PX7-20, and much finning and flopping of it was observed for a few minutes. The whales dispersed into small groups again and moved westward, getting to a perpendicular with Crescent Rock by about 13:35. One male, PX7 frame 21, and a female became very active in a tight circle, as if feeding, so I took movies of them for a few spurts. Other whales began, quote, feeding also, and 2 baby whales were left in our immediate vicinity to play and look at us as their mothers were down for long periods of time. One of the babies was only about 8.5 feet long and designated Pink Baby by Camille, and the other was 10 to 11 feet long. At 1350 there was another breach, and some more lobtailing and finning. At 1414 we were about 3 miles west of Crescent Rock and passing through areas of kelp with the whales. One male had a long string of kelp draped around its dorsal fin, and another male whale swam directly through a small patch of kelp. Do they enjoy the feel of kelp on their skin? By 1440, the aggregation of whales had moved slightly ahead of us as we idled. They had again formed two separate groups, 22 or 23 and 15 to 17, as they continued moving westerly. The wind came upon us strong from the east with rain and chill. Reluctantly, we departed the whales at 15:15, about 1.5 miles offshore Twin Rivers, to return to Port Angeles while getting was good. I called Mike Bigg in the evening, and from my description of some of the whales we had seen, he identified the following. Male L8, close saddle, that bite on the lower third of the posterior margin of the fin. Male K5, open saddle with a chevron or sergeant stripes on the saddle pattern. L10, closed saddle with a bite mark up near the top of the dorsal fin, a posterior margin. And male K1 that had 2 notches, made by Mike Bigg et al. In October 1973 when they attached a radio transmitter to this whale nicknamed Taku, and then released him. He was too large for the capture travel. The transmitter was designed to release after 1 month. Mike also said that a school of whales, presumably this group, was reported inbound on the Vancouver Island side of the Strait of Juan de Fuca on Monday, 5 April. He launched from Victoria to intercept them, but apparently the whales did not follow their usual route of traveling past Victoria and up Harrow Strait. Our intercept and documentation of these whales is the first undeniable record of their presence in these waters in the month of April. Mike has records of these resident pod males for each other month of the year. So that was Encounter 1, 1976. So begins Orca Survey.